Alone Australia, episode 10 and 11 recap. If you haven't watched episode 11, then turn off now and come back when you've watched it, because I'm going to talk about who wins. There's another thunderstorm going on right now, but I'm just going to crack on. Yeah, it's been a huge journey to get here, and it's been 9 months since that was shot. And there's been a lot of stuff going around in my head since that time, which I've only really just been able to now analyse and get my head around. So, yeah, it's been a journey. I've got to start by saying absolute congratulations to you, Gina. You absolutely smashed it. And it was a real pleasure watching you go through. And I didn't know that you were the only one out there. I thought there was a very good chance that you were. But, you know, I didn't see your journey until I saw it on TV. And even I was hoping you were going to win. Like, I know that sounds crazy. Like, of course I wanted to win, but when I just saw the way you were going through and stuff, like, you know, I could see, you know, it's great that you won. And I'm really, really happy for you. Oh man, there's so many things to fit into this. So I'm going to try and keep it in some little silos and then summarise stuff at the end. It is worth noting though that the last 34 days of the whole competition, or the whole thing, was compressed into kind of 1.5 episodes. So there's only so much stuff they can fit in, and so many things that happened with me and with Gina never came to light. So I'm going to talk about some of those things. All right, I'm going to just talk about, Michael left, he chose to, on good terms, good decision, well done. I'm just massively huge respect for you, Michael. 30 days with no food. I can actually sympathise, because I went 23 days and then another 18 days a week later. Yeah, it sucks, but you know, it's not the end of the world, but it sucks. So good on you, mate. Fantastic tenacity. Okay, so I'm going to talk about my things, and then I'll relate things to Gina's stuff as well. And I'm not trying to make excuses here. I'm just trying to analyse what happened with my situation. And I have an military aviation background, and what aviation is really good at doing is analysing incidents and accidents and figuring out what happened, what the root causes were. So if you do that again, how can you do it and get a better result? So that's what everything I do, I'm always trying to apply that mindset. So if I'm talking about trying to do longer and stuff, I'm not trying to talk about beating Gina. It's about wanting to, well, that was a good thunderstorm, that one. It's about wanting to analyse how I could have gone longer. And that was my goal going out there. Yeah, I wanted to win the money, yeah, I wanted to win it, but I wanted to actually answer the question, could I reach self-sustainment out there? And that's what I was aiming to do. So these are kind of debrief points for myself, and as I talk it out, it helps stick in my mind next time I'm in one of these situations, because I tend to stick myself in them, whether there's a production being made by somebody else or whether I do it myself. So I'm going to talk about food intake, just quickly. So I ate nothing until day 23, then I got a week's worth of trout and eels, then I ate nothing for another 18 days until the night of day 48, and then I basically had food until about day 62, and then I got removed on day 64. So looking at the plant side of things, right, I really didn't eat much in that first 30 days. I was just relying on my fat stores, but then after 30 days, things like vitamin C and other minerals and stuff can start to come out of your body, and you do need to replace them. So I was disciplined from day 30 onwards to eat definitely 2, but hopefully aiming for three or 4 types of plant foods. My staples were sausage, I call it sword grass, where you just eat the base. You don't get much out of it. Maybe the sum total of my foraging was probably about 1 or 2 mouthfuls of greens, which isn't much, but there is enough trace elements in those things. Another thing I had was I call it sedge. It's a different kind of watergrass kind of thing, and I used to chew the base, the little corm that grows out underground from those. And there was another sort of waterweed thing that I ate a fair bit of volume-wise. they were my kind of three staples. I did try the tree fern. It wasn't usable. And there was stinger nettles, which there wasn't much of. Something called turkey rhubarb, which tasted great, not much of. And I found some little tubers underneath, something that looked like an iris. But anyway, not much plant food, but enough to keep the trace elements and vitamins of some degree coming in. Right, with the trout, so between day 23 and day 30, I got 3 eels and 3 trout. And the eels are high fat, lots of food in them, lots of energy. Yeah, I boiled the part of the first one and then it was smoked. And then after that, I just started frying them. And that was the best way because you keep everything in there. Any fat that comes out of the eel stays in the pot and you eat it. So nothing gets thrown away. And if I forget to mention this later, on those ladder eels that I caught later on, I ate every single piece of it. The only things that I spat out were some of the facial bones. I'll cover it now because I'll probably forget when I get to it. So even the skin, I was skinning them and frying up the skin and making eel chips, which ended up tasting fantastic. I ate all of the flesh and the bones. I charring is not quite the right word, but I heated them up to the point where they changed chemical composition from a bone and they had a slightly more yellowy colour after that. And then I could just chomp the bones and they just powdered up and they tasted like the most magnificent chips you could ever imagine. So even the facial bones and the head, I would cook it all up and just some of the facial bones I'd spit out. But I ate probably 99.5% of the animal by the end. The first few eels I was more wasteful. It took me a while to figure out that I could eat the skin that particular way. I tried using the skin for bait for yabbies and stuff, so it wasn't totally wasted, but yeah, by the end I was eating everything. So yeah, that 7 days of eels stopped on day 30, nothing. So I fished every day from day 2 onwards. There were times when I just couldn't get worms. That was a real struggle. Yeah, worms can be really difficult there. But the fishing, the only time I caught fish for that first half was in that 7-day window. And straight away I was like, that's just weird. Like I carpet bombed the water with bait and lures and all sorts of different things. And I only got fish in that 7-day window. And I've fished all over the place. I fished for trout my whole life. It makes it look like I'm a pretty useless fisherman on there, but I was fishing since I was a little kid. And I've fished for trout and all those kinds of freshwater fish my whole life since, fly fishing as well. And I made a fly rod out there as well. So the only reason I was getting fancy was because the basics of fishing, you know, with appropriate size hooks in appropriate places was not working. That's why I went to all that extra effort. So when I started to analyse what is it that made them switch on and then switch off, and it wasn't to do with the water level at all. So the only theory I came up with was moon phase. So I memorised the full moons and dates and stuff before I went in there. And I went, you know what? This has just stopped dead in its tracks from day 30. If I equate that on the moon cycle to the next waxing gibbous phase. So waxing gibbous is when you've got the moon that's like a lemon cut in half, or an orange cut in half, and it's growing into the round stage and then hits full. In that takes a week to go from there to there. That's the only time I could catch fish. And I said around day 49, if it's moon phase, I'll start catching again. And that is exactly what happened. I just starved it out from day 30 to day 40, fishing all the time, still devoting hours and hours a day, taken away from my other trap making tasks, to search for worms, every possible way I could think of to find them, but they weren't coming. And that's why approaching day 49, which was my prediction, I was really desperate for worms. And that's where I had that, I got 1.5 worms. I baited up one of them and the other half worm disappeared from my worm bag. And so that was devastating. But the prediction was correct. So that night I got 1 trout and I used the fresh guts for bait. And then the next morning I got 3 eels in one freaking morning. So that one worm turned into a trout, turned into 3 eels. And then I had eel leftovers and I got 3 more trout in that phase as well. So I stocked, and these were big. I actually got 5 eels in that second phase there. 3 of them were big. One of them was 83 centimetres, heavy. And on the bait there, the eels would not touch eel gut for bait. They wouldn't touch eel flesh. The trout, maybe they did get eel flesh, but trout would eat eel bait, eel flesh and not guts as bait. The only thing that never worked was eel guts. But trout guts worked for eels. Trout flesh worked for eels, and I don't think the eels ever took anything other than worms for me. And I flogged it, because I was having trouble getting worms. So I really tried to use every part of those animals, the offcuts, for bait. They did not do it. And people have messaged me going, I use eel guts for bait, it works great around here. That's good, but it doesn't work where I was. So yeah, those 5 eels and those fish, I stretched out. Now I could have banged them down, probably chugged them all down in about 4 days if I'd just gone hard at it. And I should mention, when you've starved for that long, when you first have the food again, it sits funny with you. You can't eat too much. You've got to wait for a day and you're like, oh, I feel a bit queasy. And then all of a sudden, you've warmed your body up and then it's like, yeah, feed me. You really have to stop yourself from eating too much. Now, I could have just smashed it down in 3 or 4 days, but I knew that, and I was correct, and around day 55, the eels would just stop dead in the water, and the trout, and they did. They just bang stopped. So I'm like, okay, in order to get my next window, it's not going to be until day 75 or day 76. I need to stretch out the salts and the nutrients in this meat as long as I can, and because that's the best way for me to stay out here. Now, on my previous adventure, I lost a mackerel to going off, and it was devastating. And so that's why I was sniffing like a little rat every day, the fillets, to see whether they were going off. And that's why I managed to catch them just as they were thinking about turning. And in the end, I probably lost well, you saw the size of the handful of meat that I lost. I chucked it away. Everyone's like, why didn't you use it for bait? Because it doesn't work for bait. I tried it. So yeah, that was a worthy sacrifice, because that meant my last meal was at about day 62 or something. So I didn't have a salt block out there. It was a deliberate decision, but eel meat has salt. So my last salt intake was day 62. If I'd shoveled them down, my last salt intake would have been day 52 or something like that. So, maybe my last deal was maybe day 55 or something. So that would have been my last salt intake. So it was a risk, but it was very calculated, and I am happy with how it turned out. Mind you, I did eat some eel that was going funny, and it did taste funny, and I went, but it was okay. Yeah, so that was a gamble, and that gamble paid off. Many of the other ones didn't. And same with the trout. I ate everything of the trout, the bones, the guts, everything. Absolutely. Maybe some bits of the gut I didn't eat, but I used them for bait. It's because I had to use something for bait, right? So I just saved the crappier bits for bait. Right. Trapping. This is a huge story that continued for me, and you did not see that I caught a bloody pademelon in my trap, and it busted out. So I'm just going to quickly have them with the traps. First one out, that's when we went over the tripwire. I changed that to a pressure plate. The disturbance of the ground stopped them going through there, so I moved to another place. That was a long story, that one. Had a couple of near misses with birds actually walking through and setting off the tripwire, and I had I think close calls with a couple of pademelons there, but they didn't show up in the camera, don't know. But that drop net trap that came down, and he just squeezed out the side. After that, because I also had a quoll get in the trap and bust out as well. Basically, the paracord inner was too weak to be able to hold animals of that size. So the first thing I had to do in order to get them in the trap was take the elastic out of all my underpants, pull it down taut from all 4 corners, pegged it into the ground. Now the trap was under even more pressure when I pulled it up to set it. It was a real nightmare. But then when first the quoll and the pademelon got in there, the trap just went whoosh, down onto the ground like that, and they had no way of running out of it like they did last time. But when they busted out, once again, devastation. But then I figured out a new way of making a trap, which it totally occurred to me out there for the first time. And that's why I know my brain was functioning 100%, because I was still able to manage everything and come up with engineering ideas, which I'd never thought of in fully fed life. So I sliced, it took about 3 or 4 days to do this, the spare scrap of tarp that I didn't use for the kayak, I sliced up into when you pull apart a Christmas decoration and it comes apart into a big thing. I'll chuck a clip of it in when I find the thing. It's in the shed. it became this incredibly strong strap that you're like, you couldn't break. So when I was pulled, I had a pademelon trap that had proven to catch a pademelon, and I now had a net capable of holding a pademelon. So I would have got a pademelon sometime, I would say, within maybe the next 2 weeks. Now, maybe it would have lifted the thing up, maybe I'd need to adjust it a little bit more, but I had pretty much tweaked that thing so it was really solid. So yeah, that's really frustrating. I made a bunch of other things. I made a bird trap, like you see on the American series. I put an outrigger on my kayak. The fly rod was a full fly rod, fly reel with my other spool, the welding spool, tapering fly line by adjusting the inners of the paracord, tapered leader. That's why I was specific about the line classes that I took, and I tied wet flies. I didn't have dry flying hooks, it's a long story, but I never once in the whole time I was out there did I see a hatch or a rising thing of trout everywhere that you would expect. Oh yeah, made a Mexican bar stool just for when I'm sitting around the fire so it was comfy. And inside tables as well, just to keep my stuff off the ground and stay comfortable. So yeah, there's many more things that got made. And so Gina as well was telling me she made a whole bunch of stuff. And she had huge successes with fishing and with eels as well. And it didn't get included. There's just not enough time. It's one of the things, you know, you can't get everything in there. So we're both like, oh, why didn't those other things get included? Yeah. So that was the food journey. I was going to quickly cover how Gina was going there. So yeah, she was definitely losing weight, but she was able to get trout. From day 20, she started to get trout regularly. I think there's a stage of 5 days in there where she wasn't able to get trout, but she was able to get trout all the way till the point she was removed. And then before being removed, she got into some huge amount of eels. She got, I think she said 12, don't quote me if I'm wrong, just watch Gina's recaps because she'll tell you exactly what she got. But she had a real win with food. So she was in a very solid position when she was removed. So on that fishing stuff, I really did do a fucking solid effort of fishing appropriately for trout. And my place only gave me trout in that limited time there. And, you know, I really do think that is a locational thing. So had Gina not got the wallaby, so yeah, let's talk about the wallaby. I was freaking amazed how that wallaby happened. And, you know, I questioned it, you know. I was like, how does that happen? You know, I spoke to Gina, and she can recount it in her own thing, because I'll probably get it wrong. But, you know, in my lifetime out in the bush and stuff, there have been times where, you know, I've been sitting there and an animal like a marsupial has come through and like almost startled bounce into you, right? That kind of thing can happen. For me, I went out and actively ambush sat with my comfy chair for hours next to game trails with my club over my arm like this, so I could just straight away swing straight into the area that I needed to go to. So, you know, because otherwise if I had to pull it back, you saw how their reactions are when that net fell down. They are freaking ninjas with night vision. They're extremely agile. So anyway, I tried ambush technique multiple times, and it didn't work out, but it worked out for Gina. Had she not got that wallaby, it's still, because she was getting regular fish, that would have been tough. I basically would have had to get into that either regular fish or stocked up enough during my 1 week of fishing to be able to do that. But that would have been possible for me to get to my next eel window, the waxing gibbous, had I not been removed. All right, so this has been a huge stress for me for the last 9 months. Because when I was removed, I had no symptoms, physical symptoms of any medical condition. I knew my estimate of my weight was correct, within a kilo. So, and I'd memorised the boundaries of the BMI graph for my weight, and I knew that I was in the middle of the green BMI range. And I was 100% mentally and physically capable. So I mentioned the mental stuff. Physically, the 2 days before I was removed, I was lifting heavy logs, probably 70, 80 kilos, because the water dropped right down, and I could see that the 3 places where I'd been catching the fish were the only places on the bank where there was just clear mud and no tangles of wood. So I realised if I clear out the rest of that wood, it will be not only more attractive, but I will never get a snag when I throw my line in. So I had optimised my fishing site. So that shows I was completely physically capable of lifting heavy stuff. I was more fatigued, don't get me wrong. That is a symptom, or yeah, effectively a symptom of a slower metabolic rate. But that's a joy, that's a good thing. Everyone that's been out there for more than 3 weeks has this slowing of metabolic rate, which allows you to conserve energy. So yeah, I got removed and I was just like, why? Why are you removing me? Because it just doesn't seem right to me that my observations would be at a point where I'd need to be removed when I was still at a healthy weight with no symptoms. Why did my body not just burn the fat? There was still fat under my skin, because I can compare it closely with the amount that I had on my big expedition previously, 8 months before, finishing 50-day survival expedition, which I didn't put on any weight for. I had no skin fold on the last one, and this one I still had, you know, I don't know, like 3 or 4 times as much skin fold when I was removed from alone. Why did my body not just break that down and fuel the cardiovascular system? After a hell of a lot of questioning of the docs and research and all that kind of stuff, I think the most likely explanation is that I had COVID in that first week. So yeah, COVID sucked because it changed my plan. I felt like crap, but whatevs, that doesn't really matter. And it would have accelerated my weight loss, because when I get the flu, I normally lose a few kilos. At a ½ kilo weight loss a day rate that I was experiencing, 3 kilos is 6 days, like it's a day penalty like that. But what's important longer term for me, because we're now talking, you know, 60 days almost after I'd finished COVID, was that COVID, there's a lot of evidence showing COVID changes your cardiovascular observations in the medium to long term. I had a very healthy body going in. I had 20 years of aviation medicals where you're getting prodded and poked. I was pulling high G for a decade in military aircraft, where blood pressure is the only thing that stops you from graying out and getting G-lock, like fainting, loss of consciousness when you're pulling G. I had a very healthy system going in. The doctors agree that my system was very, very healthy going in. So why then, that's the actual explanation to me, that a healthy body would show those signs, because typically in those kinds of situations, your body just burns the fuel that I still had available to maintain your cardiovascular system. I still had 12 kilos to lose before I got to the bottom of the healthy BMI chart. I agree, I look a bit skinny, right? No doubt about it. But protocol-wise, I'm in the middle of the healthy green range from a BMI chart, right? So, yeah, so COVID to me is the most likely explanation for why my observations were still in the normal range for blood pressure, but they were down the bottom end of it, but still not in the area where you start calling it low. So that was one thing of COVID. The other thing was that they classed me in a risk category of recovering COVID patient. So before that, it would just be middle-aged male, malnutrition. It's now middle-aged male, malnutrition recovering from COVID. So the tolerance that they gave me was less than if you took that one away. So COVID reduced my time. What I needed to, you know, be able to reach self-sustainment was just get another 10 days. I'm confident that without COVID, I would have got another 10 days, which would have got to me to my eel phase. I do think it's most likely that I would have got more eels than last time. I reckon if I got 15, that would have been enough to hit self-sustaining to the next phase. And then as spring came in, everything's changing. The fishing could definitely switch back on, like proper on the whole time. I don't know. They're the things that I take away from this. Should I have taken a salt block? Maybe, but I did eat a lot of meat in the last 2 weeks before I was removed. So I don't know. If I go back on alone, if they give me another chance at a redemption show or something like that, I'm going to really analyse that a lot more closely. Just back on the starvation thing, so I make films about people in historic survival situations, so I research them a lot and I actually place myself in them. When people die, and these are survivors who've had people around them die, I never read about people just dropping dead instantly from starvation. They generally lose mobility and they will just sit down, and then eventually they can't get up, and then days later they die of starvation. That's why I don't think the risk of doing this kind of thing is as high as they think. Mind you, COVID does increase heart attack risk and stuff. So that's another reason again why I'm giving the doctor a leave pass for pulling me out. Whew, right. Something that you didn't see out there is the other side of me, which is a very large part, which is I do have a huge amount of respect for nature. And I am really not the kind of person that you would describe as being a conqueror of nature. One of the reasons I make films, and I've just written a book, is because I'm trying to improve the respect, highlight areas of we have with the environment which need addressing. Also, I'm trying to increase the respect we have for Aboriginal people and tie those two things together by saying we need to take the way that Aboriginal people manage the bush and do that, and so we can look after the bush better. Now, the narrative was that there was, you know, Gina who was working with the earth, and you know, I think they're pointing the finger at me of saying I'm working against it. That's not really how it worked. So anyway, I just thought I'd point that out. So because I kind of was stereotyped in a way, I was very grateful. There was many times on camera I'm really grateful. I'm talking about those things I was just talking about. I'm just so thankful for this wonderful eel meat that I've eaten. And there's, from day 50 for me, I called it phase 2. And in fact, Gina called it phase 2 as well. So we were going through the same mental journey, and we were both bloody loving it out there. Yeah, it sucked, but it was like, this is real. And that's why I'm devastated for her that she got her time cut short by me coming out. The same way I got cut short. But, you know, I understand the docs. Anyway, so that side of me didn't come out because, you know, let's be honest, it wasn't really fitting that narrative of the conqueror kind of thing. But that's who I am. And I appreciate that Gina, she understands that. And, you know, that's something that happens, you know, when you go on a TV show. You know, it doesn't always come out how you would expect or want. And I've got to be honest, Gina is absolute dynamite on camera, and it's not because she's putting it on. She's just like, she's an open book, and what you see is beautiful on the inside. Like, and so that's why I was saying, like, I can watch it and I can see why people want Gina to win. And she's going to use the platform that she's created for herself for really good things. And so the kinds of things she wants to change or in the world are the same kinds of things I want to change. So it's kind of weird. I never would have expected that the way I would help that story get out is to be portrayed as opposite, to make it more watchable, to therefore give more platform. But she's kind of doing the kind of thing that I am aiming to do anyway. So good on you. She's doing a bloody fantastic job. Make sure you watch Gina's recap video. I can't wait to see it. And I really enjoy or value the friendship that Gina and I have, because we're the only kind of people that stayed out there the same amount of time. And it's not about toughing it out. It's not even really survival. It's just having the privilege of having the experience. So it's more that we have the shared privilege of how rewarding the experience was. And because we stayed out there a bit longer, it just helped us to get more reward. So yeah, so it's been having questions in my mind and stuff. They finally have been answered. So we watched the final 2 episodes before the public did. And then I literally jumped in a car, drove across the city, went to a studio, and then did the reunion show. And I was still nutting through in my brain, what are the things, you know, but I did get the answers that I needed, speaking to the producers and, you know, the docs and Gina and all those things. So yeah, I'm in a happy place now, and really looking forward to the next kind of thing. If you've enjoyed these recaps and you like watching survival journeys, I'm going to put a little plug in here for my book. Just this morning, I went down to the printers and authorised the final, the sign-off for copies to be made. And it's about a journey I did up the Great Barrier Reef in a dugout canoe. It was 50 days. I lived completely off the land and the sea, and I did not put weight on before that one. So a lot of the parallels that I draw on alone were from the fairly similar situation to I was in out there. And I managed to unpack the really stressful events that happened on that journey when I was out and alone as well. So there's been lots of great things about going on this, even if you don't win. So thanks heaps for watching. I'm also going to make a video just showing the stuff that I was lucky enough that I was allowed to take out some of the stuff that I made. My fishing rod, the canoe, my net. So I'll make another video and just show you those things. I also might talk about starvation, some of the other aspects as well. If there's anything you particularly want to see, just chuck it in the comments, and I'll have a look at making a final video to wrap everything up. Thanks heaps for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.